You do not belong here." The words cut through the noise of the great hall like a blade, sharp and precise. Arya froze with the silver tray still balanced in her trembling hands, wine sloshing dangerously close to the rim of crystal glasses that cost more than she would earn in a lifetime. Lady Vivian stood before her, draped in silk the color of fresh blood, her perfect lips curved into a smile that never reached her cold blue eyes. "Servants enter through the back. Or did you think wearing those rags would somehow make you invisible enough to skulk around where your betters gather?" The laughter that followed was worse than the words. It rippled through the assembled nobles like a wave, each chuckle and snicker another small death to whatever remained of Arya's dignity. She wanted to explain that head servant Mara had sent her precisely this way, that she was only following orders, but her throat had closed around the words. It always did. 5 years in the royal palace, and she still had not learned how to defend herself against their cruelty. She lowered her gaze to the floor, to the marble so polished she could see the distorted reflection of her own face staring back. Plain, unremarkable, forgettable. Everything a wolf should not be, and she was not even that much. No wolf had ever stirred inside her chest. No shift had ever transformed her body. She was Omega in name only, lacking even that most basic gift that separated their kind from humans. "I apologize, lady." "Vivian," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I will leave immediately." She turned, grateful for the escape, but Vivian was not finished. "Wait." The command froze Arya mid-step. "Come here." It was not a request. Arya turned back slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she wondered if everyone could hear it. She approached, eyes still downcast, until she stood directly before the lady who would surely be chosen as queen tonight. Everyone said so. Vivienne was perfect in every way that mattered. Beautiful, powerful. From the oldest and most prestigious bloodline in the kingdom, after the royal family itself. And cruel. But no one seemed to count that against her. "Look at me when I speak to you," Vivienne commanded. Arya raised her eyes reluctantly, meeting that glacial blue stare. Do you know what tonight is? Of course she knew. Everyone in the entire kingdom knew. Tonight was the choosing ceremony. The night Alpha King Demon would select his queen. From among the eligible she-wolves of noble birth. The palace had been preparing for weeks, transforming the grand ballroom into something out of a fairy tale with thousands of white roses and crystal chandeliers that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows across the walls. Arya had helped arrange many of those roses herself, her fingers pricked bloody by thorns, while ladies like Vivian were pampered and prepared for their moment in the spotlight. "Yes, my lady," Arya answered. "Then, you understand that tonight, everything changes. For some of us." Vivian reached out and fingered the rough fabric of Arya's sleeve, her nose wrinkling in distaste. "For others, well, some people are born to serve. Some people will always be exactly what they are. Nothing." She released the fabric and waved her hand dismissively. "You may go. Try not to embarrass yourself further by being seen." Arya did not need to be told twice. She hurried toward the servants' corridor. The tray clutched so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Behind her, she heard Vivian's musical laugh, and someone saying something she could not quite make out, followed by more laughter. Her cheeks burned with shame, but she blinked back the tears that threatened. Crying solved nothing. Crying only made things worse. She had learned that lesson early. The servants' quarters were a different world from the glittering palace above. Here the walls were plain stone, the floors bare, the air thick with the smell of cooking food and lye soap. Arya returned the tray to the kitchens where Mara waited with a scowl already fixed on her weathered face. "Took you long enough," the head servant snapped. "The ceremony starts in less than an hour and there are still 100 things to prepare. Get yourself cleaned up and changed. You will be serving tonight." Arya's stomach dropped. "Serving?" But I thought only the senior staff was assigned to the ceremony. Mara's expression softened slightly, which somehow made it worse. Pity was harder to bear than anger. Bethany fell ill. Someone has to take her place, and you are all we have. Try not to drop anything or make a spectacle of yourself. Keep your head down and stay invisible. Can you manage that? Invisible. Yes, Arya could manage that. She had been invisible her entire life. She nodded and retreated to the tiny room she shared with 3 other servant girls, none of whom were present. They would all be frantically preparing for the ceremony, making sure every detail was perfect for the most important night in recent history. Arya washed her face and hands in the basin of cold water, studying her reflection in the cracked mirror above it. Dark hair that refused to behave no matter how she tried to tame it. Gray eyes that held no particular distinction. A face that would never launch ships or inspire poetry. She was not ugly, precisely, but she was not beautiful either. She was aggressively average in every way except the one that mattered most. She had no wolf. She changed into her formal serving uniform, a simple black dress with a white apron that at least was clean and relatively new. It was still obviously a servant's garb, designed to help her blend into the background, but it was better than the threadbare work clothes she had been wearing. She braided her hair severely and pinned it at the nape of her neck, tucking away every stray strand. Invisible. That was the goal. The grand ballroom took her breath away, even though she had spent days preparing it. Lit by what seemed like 1,000 candles in addition to the massive chandeliers, it glowed like something out of a dream. The white roses she had helped arrange filled the air with their sweet perfume, almost but not quite covering the mingled scents of expensive perfumes and the underlying musk of powerful wolves gathered in one place. The nobles had assembled in their finest clothes, the she-wolves who hoped to be chosen wearing gowns that probably cost more than Arya would earn in 10 years. They clustered in groups, laughing and chatting with an ease that came from lives lived without worry or want. At the far end of the ballroom, on a raised dais, sat the throne, empty for now, waiting for the king who would arrive only when everything was ready. Arya took her position along the wall with the other servants, her hands clasped in front of her, her expression carefully neutral. From here, she could see everything while being seen by no one. Invisible, just as it should be. The assembled nobles grew quiet as the royal steward, an ancient wolf named Marcus, whose gray hair spoke of centuries of service, stepped forward and raised his staff. The sharp crack of wood on marble echoed through the sudden silence. All rise for His Majesty, Alpha King Demon Blackthorn, ruler of the Northern Territories, defender of the old ways, first of his name. The doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open, and he entered. Even from her position, against the wall, even having seen him before in passing, Arya felt the impact of his presence like a physical force. Alpha King Demon was not a large man by the standards of their kind, but he radiated power in a way that made size irrelevant. Dark hair worn slightly too long, sharp features that might have been handsome if they were not so severe, and eyes that gleamed gold even in human form. He moved with the fluid grace of his wolf always present just beneath his skin, and the crowd parted before him like water. He wore black, as always, simple and unadorned except for the silver crown that rested on his dark hair and the heavy signet ring on his right hand. He needed no decoration. His presence was ornamentation enough. Arya's breath caught in her chest, though she could not have said why. She had seen him before. He had never noticed her. Not once in 5 years. Why would tonight be any different? Demon ascended to the dais and turned to face the assembled crowd. His expression revealed nothing. If he felt anything about the ritual he was about to perform, about choosing a queen from among the eligible she-wolves who waited with barely concealed anticipation, his face did not show it. "Begin," he said simply. Marcus struck his staff against the floor again. "Let the presentation commence. The she-wolves of noble birth, will approach when called, that His Majesty might consider each as a potential queen. One by one, names were called. One by one, beautiful she-wolves in stunning gowns approached the dais, curtsied deeply, and stood beneath the king's scrutiny for a long moment, before being dismissed with a slight nod. Arya watched from her invisible position against the wall, her hands still clasped, her expression neutral even as something strange began to build in her chest. A pressure, a warmth, a feeling she could not name. It grew stronger with each she-wolf who was presented and dismissed. It should not have mattered to her who the king chose. Her life would not change regardless. She would still be a servant, still be Omega, still be invisible. And yet, that strange pressure in her chest continued to build until it almost hurt to breathe. Lady Vivian Ashford, daughter of Duke Ashford, of the Silver Moon bloodline. Vivian glided forward with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her own worth. Her blood-red gown fit her like it had been painted on, and her golden hair had been arranged in an elaborate style that must have taken hours to create. She was stunning. She was perfect. She was everything a queen should be. She curtsied before the king with practiced grace, her head bowed just enough to show respect without suggesting subservience. When she raised her eyes to meet his, she smiled. A slow, knowing smile that promised things Arya could not begin to imagine. The king regarded her in silence for a long moment. Vivian's smile never wavered. She looked utterly certain of her victory. And why should she not? Who else could possibly compare? Finally, Demon spoke. "Thank you, Lady Vivian. You may return to your place." Something flickered across Vivian's face, too quick to identify, before she curtsied again and retreated. But Arya noticed that her movements were slightly less graceful than before, her smile slightly more strained. Perhaps she had expected an immediate declaration. Perhaps she had thought herself so obviously superior that no other presentations would be necessary. More names were called. More she-wolves presented themselves. The king examined each with the same impassive expression, said the same words of dismissal, revealed nothing of his thoughts. The pressure in Arya's chest had grown so intense she felt lightheaded. Her hands trembled where they were clasped in front of her, and she had to concentrate on keeping her breathing steady. What was wrong with her? Was she ill? Had she eaten something that disagreed with her? She should ask to be excused, should retreat to her room and lie down until whatever this was past. But she could not move. Her feet seemed rooted to the floor, her body refusing to obey her mind's commands. Finally, the last name was called. The last she-wolf presented and dismissed. Marcus looked to the king, clearly expecting a decision, but Demon remained seated, his golden eyes scanning the room as if searching for something. The silence stretched. Nobles began to shift uncomfortably, exchanging confused glances. Vivian stood. Straighter, her chin lifted expectantly. This was the moment. He would call her name, and she would ascend to the dais as the chosen queen. "There is another," Demon said quietly. The words carried in the hushed ballroom. Marcus looked confused. "Your Majesty, all eligible she-wolves of noble birth have been presented." "I did not ask for noble birth," Demon replied, his voice still soft but carrying an edge now. "I asked if there was another." His eyes continued to scan the room, passing over the assembled nobles, moving toward the walls where the servants waited in their invisible positions. No. Arya's heart stopped. No, he could not possibly. His eyes found her, locked on her, held. The pressure in her chest exploded outward in a wave that nearly drove her to her knees. Every nerve ending in her body came alive at once, every sense suddenly heightened to an almost painful degree. She could smell him across the entire length of the ballroom, pine and smoke and something wild that called to a part of her she had never known existed. She could feel his gaze on her skin like a physical touch. And beneath it all, beneath the shock and confusion and terror, she felt something else. Recognition. As if some part of her that had been sleeping her entire life had suddenly opened its eyes and known him. "You," Demon said, pointing directly at her. "Come here." The ballroom erupted in shocked whispers that quickly grew to a roar of confused voices. Arya could not move. Could not breathe. Could not think. This was not happening. This could not be happening. "Did he just point at that servant?" someone said nearby, their voice carrying in a brief lull in the noise. "Has he lost his mind?" Another voice answered. Mara appeared at Arya's elbow, her face pale with shock. "Go," she hissed. "You heard his majesty. Go." Arya's legs moved without conscious thought, carrying her forward through the crowd that parted around her, as if she carried some contagious disease. She was aware of every stare burning into her, every whisper that followed in her wake. The walk to the dais seemed to take an eternity, and no time at all. She stopped at the bottom of the steps, unable to go further, unable to look up at the man whose attention had just destroyed any hope she had of remaining invisible ever again. "Approach," Demon commanded. Arya climbed the steps on legs that shook so badly she feared she would fall. She reached the top and forced herself to curtsy, her movements clumsy compared to the graceful nobles who had preceded her. When she straightened, she finally looked at him. Up close, his eyes were even more striking. Pure gold, like molten metal, and fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to flee and move closer in equal measure. "What is your name?" His voice was deep, resonant, and sent shivers down her spine for reasons she could not explain. "Arya, your majesty," she managed, her voice barely audible. "Arya," he repeated, as if testing how. The name felt in his mouth. "Do you know why I called you here?" She shook her head mutely. How could she possibly know? Nothing about this made any sense. He stood, towering over her, and she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and touched her cheek with his fingertips. The contact sent electricity shooting through her entire body. The pressure that had been building in her chest suddenly focused to a single point, and for one impossible moment, she could have sworn she felt something stir inside her. Something that had never been there before. "Because you are mine," Demon said simply, and the ballroom exploded into chaos. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. Arya stood frozen on the dais as voices rose in protest and shock around them. She could not process what was happening, could not understand what the king had just said, or why. His hand remained on her cheek, warm and steady, an anchor in the storm that had erupted around them. "Your Majesty, this is unprecedented." The voice belonged to Duke Ashford, Vivienne's father, a massive wolf with silver streaking his dark hair and a face flushed red with outrage. "This girl is Omega. She has no wolf. She is a servant. You cannot possibly be serious." Demon's eyes never left Arya's face, but his voice carried clearly when he spoke. "I am perfectly serious, Duke Ashford, and I am also your king. Perhaps you would do well to remember that before you question my decisions." The Duke sputtered, but fell silent. Vivienne, however, had no such restraint. She pushed through the crowd to the base of the dais, her beautiful face twisted with fury that made her look almost unrecognizable. "She is nobody," Vivienne spat. "She has no family, no bloodline, no power. She is not even a real wolf. You would choose her over me? Over all of us?" Finally, Demon looked away from Arya to fix his golden stare on Vivienne. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I have chosen," he said coldly. "And I do not answer to you, Lady Vivienne. Not now. Not ever." Vivienne's hands clenched into fists at her sides. For a moment, Arya thought she might actually attack, might shift right there in the ballroom and try to tear her apart. But Vivian was many things. Stupid was not one of them. She understood power, understood that even her considerable influence meant nothing compared to the Alpha King. She curtsied stiffly, her movements jerky with barely suppressed rage. "Of course, Your Majesty. Forgive my outburst." She turned and strode from the ballroom, her red dress billowing behind her like flames. Many of the other nobles followed, some shooting Arya looks of pure hatred, others simply looking confused and disturbed by the turn of events. Within minutes, the grand ballroom had emptied of everyone except the servants, Marcus the steward, and a handful of the king's personal guards. Demon finally released Arya's face, but only to take her hand in his. His grip was gentle but absolutely firm. She could not have pulled away even if she wanted to, and she was not entirely sure she wanted to. "Marcus, prepare the queen's chambers," Demon ordered. "See that they are ready within the hour." "But Your Majesty, the claiming ceremony, the public announcement, there are protocols that must be," Marcus began. "But—" Demon cut him off with a sharp look. "Within the hour," he repeated. Marcus bowed deeply and hurried away, his earlier composure shaken. The remaining guards maintained their positions around the room, their faces carefully blank. But Arya could see the shock in their eyes. They had not expected this any more than anyone else. Demon turned back to Arya, his expression softening slightly, though his eyes remained intense. "Come," he said. "We need to talk somewhere private." He led her through a side door she had not even noticed, down a corridor she had never been allowed to access, to a small study that was clearly his private domain. Books lined the walls, floor to ceiling. A massive desk dominated one corner, and a fire crackled in the fireplace despite the warmth of the evening. He released her hand only when they were inside, with the door closed firmly behind them. Arya stood in the center of the room, her mind still reeling, unable to form coherent thoughts, let alone words. This could not be real. Any moment she would wake up in her narrow bed in the servants' quarters and discover this had all been some bizarre dream. "Sit," Demon said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs near the fire. When she did not move, he added more gently, "Please, sit before you fall down. You look like you are about to collapse." That was probably accurate. Arya made her way to the chair on unsteady legs and sank into it. The leather was soft and warm, the chair clearly expensive and well used. She felt like an imposter sitting in it, like she was contaminating something valuable with her presence. Demon poured amber liquid from a crystal decanter into 2 glasses and brought one to her. "Drink," he commanded. "It will help with the shock." Arya took the glass with trembling hands and sipped cautiously. The liquid burned going down but spread warmth through her chest that did help settle her nerves slightly. Demon took the chair across from hers, studying her with those unnerving golden eyes. "I imagine you have questions," he said. Arya laughed, a slightly hysterical sound that escaped before she could stop it. "Questions? Your Majesty, I do not even know where to begin. I do not understand what just happened. I do not understand why you chose me. I do not understand what you meant when you said I was yours." "All valid questions," Demon acknowledged. He took a long swallow from his own glass before continuing. "How much do you know about mate bonds?" Arya blinked at the unexpected question. "I know the legends. That every wolf has a true mate, one person who is meant for them above all others. That when you meet your mate, you know instantly through a bond that forms between you. But those are just stories. Most wolves marry for alliance and power, not for mate bonds. The stories are true," Demon said quietly. "Mate bonds are real, though they have become rare in recent generations. Most wolves never meet their true mate. They settle for acceptable partnerships, as you said. But when a true mate bond forms, there is no mistaking it." He leaned forward, his gaze burning into hers. "I felt it the moment I entered the ballroom tonight. Your scent called to me even through the perfume of 100 other she-wolves. Your presence pulled at me even though I could not see you in the crowd. When I finally laid eyes on you, standing against that wall in your servant's dress, trying so hard to be invisible, I knew. You are my true mate.
Arya, you are meant to be my queen. The words should have sounded insane. They should have been impossible to believe. But that strange pressure in Arya's chest, the one that had built throughout the ceremony, suddenly made perfect sense. The way her body had reacted to his touch. The way she had felt like she recognized him even though they had never truly met. It had been the bond. The mate bond forming between them. But I have no wolf, Arya whispered. How can I be anyone's mate when I am barely even one of our kind? Something complicated passed across Demon's face. That is a question I cannot answer yet. But I know what I felt. I know what I feel now, sitting here with you. The bond does not lie. He paused, then added, Can you feel it? Even a little. Arya closed her eyes, trying to make sense of the riot of sensations and emotions swirling inside her. Beneath the fear and confusion and disbelief, there was something else. A warmth that seemed to radiate from somewhere deep. Inside her, reaching toward him like a plant reaching for sunlight. A sense of rightness that defied all logic. I feel something, she admitted quietly. I do not know if it is the same thing you feel, but there is something. When she opened her eyes, Demon was smiling. It transformed his severe features, made him look younger and somehow more human. That is enough, he said. That is more than enough to start. A knock at the door interrupted them. Enter, Demon called. Marcus stepped inside, bowing low. Your Majesty, the Queen's chambers are prepared as you requested. I have also taken the liberty of assigning personal attendants to assist with Lady Arya's transition. He stumbled slightly over the title, clearly struggling with the sudden elevation of a servant to royalty. Well done, Marcus. That will be all for tonight. Marcus bowed again and withdrew. Demon stood and offered his hand to Arya. Come. You must be exhausted. I will show you to your chambers and we can continue this conversation tomorrow when you have had time to rest and process. Arya took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. The contact sent that now familiar electricity through her, and she saw his eyes flash brighter gold in response. He felt it too then. Whatever this was between them, it was not one-sided. He led her through more corridors than she could track, deeper into the parts of the palace where only the royal family was permitted. Finally, they stopped before an ornate door carved with images of wolves running beneath a full moon. These are your chambers now, Demon said. Everything you need has been provided. Your attendants will help you with anything else. He paused, his hand still holding hers, clearly reluctant to let go. I know this is overwhelming. I know your entire world has been turned upside down in the space of one evening. If you need time, if you need space, you have only to ask. I will not force you into anything you are not ready for. And the kindness in his voice, the genuine concern, nearly broke something inside Arya. She had spent so long being nothing to anyone, had grown so accustomed to being invisible and unwanted, that his care felt almost painful in its intensity. Thank you, Your Majesty, she managed. Please, when we are alone, call me Demon. We are to be mates. Formality seems unnecessary. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. Sleep well, Arya. Tomorrow, everything changes. He released her hand and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the silent corridor. Arya stood before the carved door for a long moment before finally pushing it open. The chambers beyond were larger than any space she had ever occupied in her entire life. A massive bed dominated the room, draped in silk and piled with pillows. A fireplace big enough to stand in crackled with a welcoming fire. Tapestries depicting forests and wolves covered the walls.
and through an open doorway, she could see a private bathing chamber with a tub that could have held 3 people. 2 women waited near the wardrobe, both older than Arya, and wearing the distinctive uniforms of personal attendants. They curtsied when they saw her. "My lady," the taller of the 2 said, "I am Bronwyn, and this is Greta. We have been assigned to serve you. Would you like assistance preparing for bed?" "My lady." The title still sounded wrong applied to her, but Arya was too exhausted to protest or explain that she had been one of them just hours ago. She nodded mutely. Bronwyn and Greta moved with practiced efficiency, helping her out of the servant's dress she had worn to the ceremony, drawing a bath with water that steamed and smelled of lavender and rose, washing her hair with gentle hands while she sat in the tub and tried not to cry. They dressed her in a nightgown of silk so fine it felt like water against her skin, brushed out her hair until it shone, and tucked her into the enormous bed with its impossibly soft mattress and smooth sheets. "Ring if you need anything, my lady," Greta said, indicating a bell pull near the bed. "We are right next door and will come immediately." Then they were gone, and Arya was alone in chambers meant for a queen. She lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, and waited for sleep that seemed impossible. Her mind replayed the events of the evening over and over, searching for the moment where reality had fractured and allowed this impossible situation to occur. The king had chosen her. Not beautiful, perfect Vivienne. Not any of the other noble she-wolves who actually belonged in his world. Her, a servant. An Omega without a wolf. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling for that warmth that had bloomed when Demon touched her. It was still there, a steady presence that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. The mate bond, he had called it. True mates, like in the old stories her mother had told her before she died. Arya had been so young when she lost her parents, barely 6 years old. She remembered so little of them. But she remembered her mother's voice telling stories of wolves who found their perfect match, who knew each other on sight, who were 2 halves of one soul. She had thought they were just fairy tales, pretty lies to make the world seem less harsh. But if the mate bond was real, if Demon truly felt it as strongly as he claimed, then what did that mean for her? Could she really be queen? She learned to navigate the treacherous waters of court politics, to command respect from nobles who had looked through her for 5 years, to be the partner an alpha king needed? The weight of it pressed down on her chest until she could barely breathe. She was not strong enough for this. She was not brave enough. She was not anything enough. But even as the doubts swirled, that warmth in her chest pulsed steadily, and with it came a strange sense of certainty. This was meant to be. Somehow, impossibly, this was her destiny. She just had to find the courage to claim it. Eventually, exhausted beyond measure, Arya drifted into an uneasy sleep. And when she slept, she dreamed. She stood in a forest she had never seen before, surrounded by ancient trees whose branches blocked out the sky. The air smelled of earth and growing things, and something wild she could not name. She was not alone. A wolf stood before her, massive and magnificent, with fur the color of moonlight and eyes that gleamed silver in the darkness. The wolf watched her with an intelligence that went beyond animal, and Arya had the strangest sense that she should know this creature, that she should recognize those silver eyes. "Who are you?" she whispered. The wolf tilted its head, studying her, then turned and began to walk deeper into the forest. After a moment of hesitation, Arya followed. The wolf led her through the trees to a clearing where moonlight somehow penetrated the thick canopy. In the center of the clearing stood a stone altar covered in symbols Arya did not recognize, but somehow understood. Ancient symbols. Powerful symbols. The wolf stopped before the altar and turned back to face her. When it spoke, its voice echoed inside Arya's head, feminine and strong and achingly familiar. "You have forgotten who you are. But I remember. I have always remembered. Arya's heart raced. I do not understand. What are you talking about? They took me from you when you were small, bound me so deep. You could not feel me. But the bond with our mate is breaking those bindings. I am waking up, little one. Soon you will remember everything they made you forget. Arya woke with a gasp, sitting bolt upright in the enormous bed. Pale morning light filtered through the windows, and for a disoriented moment, she could not remember where she was. Then it all came flooding back. The ceremony, Demon, the mate bond, the Queen's chambers. She touched her chest again, feeling for that warmth, and found. It's stronger than before, pulsing, almost like a heartbeat that was not her own. The dream lingered in her mind with unusual clarity. Most dreams faded upon waking, but this one remained sharp and vivid. The silver wolf, the voice claiming to be part of her. The suggestion that her wolf had been bound rather than absent. It could not be real. It had to be just her mind trying to make sense of an impossible situation. But deep down, in a place she rarely acknowledged, Arya wondered if perhaps there was more truth in the dream than she wanted to admit. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "My lady?" Bronwyn's voice called. "May we enter?" "Yes," Arya called back, pulling the covers up, even though she was fully clothed in the silk nightgown. Bronwyn and Greta entered with arms full of fabric, followed by 2 more servants carrying a breakfast tray, laden with more food than Arya could eat in a week. "Good morning, my lady," Bronwyn said cheerfully. "His Majesty has requested your presence for breakfast in 1 hour. We need to get you bathed and dressed appropriately." Appropriately. As if Arya had any idea what was appropriate for a servant suddenly elevated to queen. But she allowed them to fuss over her, to bathe her again and wash her hair with different oils, to dress her in a gown of deep blue silk that fit perfectly, despite no one having taken her measurements. When they finally allowed her to look in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The woman, staring back, looked elegant and refined, her dark hair arranged in a style that was simple yet sophisticated, the gown highlighting a figure Arya had never paid attention to before. She looked like she belonged in the palace. She looked like she could be someone important. It was terrifying. Bronwyn led her through the palace to a private dining room where Demon waited. He stood when she entered, his eyes tracking her movement with an intensity that made her very aware of her body in the silk. "Dress. You look beautiful," he said simply. Arya felt her cheeks heat. "Thank you. The attendants did all the work." "I disagree. They merely revealed what was already there." He pulled out a chair for her at the small table set for 2. "Please sit. I thought we should eat together before the day becomes complicated." Arya sat, hyper-aware of his proximity as he took the seat across from her. Servants appeared to serve the food, then disappeared just as quickly, leaving them alone. "Did you sleep well?" Demon asked as he poured her tea with his own hands, an act of service that seemed strange coming from a king. "I had strange dreams," Arya admitted, "but I think that is to be expected given the circumstances." "Strange dreams about what?" There was something in his tone that made her look up sharply. He was watching her with particular attention, as if her answer mattered more than casual conversation would suggest. Should she tell him about the silver wolf? About the voice? Claiming her wolf had been bound rather than absent. It sounded insane even to her own ears. But he was her mate. If she could not be honest with him, then what hope did they have? "I dreamed of a wolf," she said slowly. "A silver wolf with eyes like moonlight. She said that my wolf was not absent but bound, that someone took her from me when I was young and hid her away." Demon set down his teacup very carefully. "That is not just a dream, Arya. That is a memory trying to surface. Or perhaps your wolf trying to reach you." Arya shook her head. "That is impossible. If someone had bound my wolf, surely I would remember. Surely someone would have noticed. Not if it was done by someone powerful enough. Not if they also bound your memories of the event. He leaned forward, his golden eyes intense. Arya, I need you to think carefully. Do you remember anything from your childhood before you came to work at the palace? Do you remember your parents, how they died, what your life was like? Before? Arya opened her mouth to say of course she remembered, but the words died on her lips. Because when she actually tried to recall specific details, there was nothing but fog. She remembered impressions, her mother's voice, her father's laugh, but their faces were blurred. Their names felt wrong on her tongue, and she could not recall a single specific event from her early childhood. I do not remember, she whispered, shock making her voice shake. Why do not I remember? Everyone remembers their childhood. Because someone made you forget, Demon said grimly. Someone bound your wolf and erased your memories, then placed you in the palace as a servant where you would be overlooked and forgotten. He reached across the table and took her hand. Arya, I think you are not what you believe yourself to be. I think your bloodline is far more significant than anyone knows, and I think someone went to great lengths to hide that from you and everyone else. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. The implications made Arya's head spin. If what Demon suggested was true, then her entire life had been a lie. But why? Why would anyone do such a thing? I do not understand, she said. Even if I did have a wolf that was bound, even if my memories were altered, why? What purpose could it possibly serve? That is what we need to find out. Demon's grip on her hand tightened. But I have suspicions. The timing is too convenient. You would have been bound around 20 years ago, yes? Around the time you lost your parents? Arya nodded mutely. 20 years ago, there was a massacre. An entire pack was wiped out in a single night. Men, women, children, all killed with a brutality that shocked even the most hardened warriors. The pack's name was Silvermoon, and they were one of the oldest and most powerful bloodlines in the kingdom. They possessed abilities that had been passed down through generations, gifts that made them formidable. Every member of that pack was slaughtered, or so we believed. He paused, his eyes searching hers. Arya, I think you are Silvermoon. I think you are the survivor everyone believed did not exist. The words hung in the air between them. Silvermoon. The name echoed in Arya's mind, and with it came a flash of something. Not quite a memory, but a feeling. Recognition. Pain. Loss so profound it threatened to drown her. Vivian is Silvermoon, Arya said faintly. She said so last. Daughter of the Silvermoon bloodline. She lied, Demon said flatly. The Ashford family are distant cousins to the true Silvermoon line at best. They claimed the name and the prestige after the massacre, when there was no one left to dispute their claim. But they do not carry the true blood. They do not have the gifts. He stood and moved around the table to kneel beside her chair, taking both her hands in his. Arya, if I am right about this, if you truly are Silvermoon, then you are not just my mate. You are royalty in your own right. Your bloodline predates mine by centuries. You are not some servant who got lucky. You are exactly who you were always meant to be. Arya pulled her hands free and stood, pacing to the window to stare out at the palace gardens. It was too much. All of it was too much. This is insane, she said. You are telling me that my entire life has been a lie? That I am some long-lost heir to a murdered pack? That someone powerful enough to bind a wolf and erase memories has been hiding me in plain sight for 20 years? Why? And who? I do not know yet, Demon admitted, rising to stand behind her. He did not touch her, but she could feel the heat of him at her back. But I intend to find out. I have already sent for the court physician, and for Elder Thorn, the oldest and most knowledgeable wolf in the kingdom, If anyone can identify magical bindings and help break them, it is Thorn. Arya turned to face him, and the genuine concern in his eyes made something ache in her chest. He believed what he was saying. He truly thought she was this lost Silver Moon heir. Part of her wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but another part, the part where that silver wolf from her dreams seemed to live, whispered that he might be right. "What if you are wrong?" she asked quietly. "What if I am just what I appear to be? A servant with no wolf and no value beyond the mate bond?" "Then you are still my queen," Demon said firmly. "The mate bond is more than enough. But I do not think I am wrong, Arya. I have learned to trust my instincts, and every instinct I have is screaming that you are far more than you appear." A knock at the door interrupted them. At Demon's call to enter, an elderly man shuffled in, his white hair hanging past his shoulders, and his face so lined with age he looked ancient. But his eyes were sharp and bright, missing nothing as they fixed on Arya. "Elder Thorn," Demon said. "Thank you for coming so quickly. You said it was urgent, Your Majesty. Something about a bound wolf and stolen memories." The old man's gaze never left Arya. "And I can see why you called me. The magical signature around this girl is extraordinary. Whoever bound her was a master of their craft." He approached Arya slowly, and she found herself unable to move as he circled her, his nostrils flaring slightly as he scented the air around her. When he spoke again, his voice was filled with wonder. "Silver Moon. I never thought I would encounter this signature again in my lifetime. The rumors were true then. Someone did survive the massacre." Arya's knees went weak, and Demon was there immediately, supporting her with an arm around her waist. "You are certain?" he asked Thorn. "As certain as I can be without breaking the bindings to confirm. But yes, Your Majesty. This girl carries Silver Moon blood. The question is how much and how powerful." Thorn turned to Arya, his expression gentling. "Child, I know this must be frightening, but I need your permission to examine the bindings more closely. It will not hurt, but it may feel strange." Arya looked at Demon, who nodded encouragingly. "It is your choice," he said. "But I think you deserve to know the truth about who you are, who she was," as if that was something simple that could be uncovered and understood. But Arya found herself nodding. "Do it," she said. "I need to know." Thorn placed his weathered hands on either side of her head, his palms cool, against her temples. He closed his eyes and went very still, so still she might have thought he had fallen asleep standing up, if not for the slight furrow of concentration between his brows. Arya felt it then, something probing gently at the edges of her consciousness. Not painful, but definitely strange, like someone running their fingers along the inside of her skull. She gasped when Thorn's probe hit something that felt like a wall, solid and impenetrable. "Easy," Demon murmured, his arm tightening around her. "Just breathe. Let him work." Thorn probed at that wall for what felt like an eternity, his frown deepening. Finally, he opened his eyes and stepped back, his hands falling to his sides. He looked shaken, which did not inspire confidence. "Well?" Demon demanded. "What did you find?" "A masterwork of binding magic such as I have never seen," Thorn said quietly. "Whoever did this was not just powerful, they were an artist. The bindings are layered, complex, designed to not only suppress her wolf, but to hide the very fact that the bindings exist. I almost missed them myself, and I have been studying magical theory for over 3 centuries. He turned to Arya, his expression grave. "Child, your wolf is there. I felt her, raging against the bindings that hold her. She is strong, possibly one of the strongest I have ever encountered. And she is very, very angry." Arya touched her chest, that place where the warmth pulsed. "Can you break the bindings?" "I can," Thorn said slowly. "But I must warn you, it will not be pleasant. The bindings have been in place for so long, they have essentially become part of you. Removing them will be painful, and your wolf's emergence after 20 years of suppression will be intense. You may lose control during the first shift. You will need to be somewhere safe, somewhere contained, with people you trust to help you through it. Demon's arm around her waist was the only thing keeping Arya upright. Her wolf was real. She had a wolf, a strong wolf that had been trapped inside her for 20 years. The relief and terror of it warred in her chest. When? She managed. When can you do it? That depends on you, Thorn said. I would recommend some preparation first. You should learn meditation techniques to help you communicate with your wolf before we free her. You should build up your physical strength, as the first shift can be taxing on the body. A week, perhaps 2, of preparation would be ideal. 2 weeks of walking around knowing the truth, but being unable to do anything about it sounded like torture. But Arya understood the wisdom in Thorn's words. If her wolf was as strong and angry as he suggested, releasing her without preparation could be disastrous. 2 weeks, she agreed. What do I need to do? Thorn smiled, the expression transforming his ancient face. You need to start remembering who you are, child, and I will help you do exactly that. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity that left Arya's head spinning. Demon had insisted she move her things to the Queen's chambers officially, though she had already been sleeping there since the night of the ceremony. He also insisted she begin taking her meals with him, attending council meetings as an observer, and learning the intricacies of court politics that she had never needed to understand as a servant. The nobles had not taken the announcement of their mating well. Oh, they smiled to her face and bowed with appropriate deference. But Arya could see the calculation in their eyes, hear the whispers that followed her through the corridors. Some questioned her bloodline. Others suggested Demon had been enchanted or deceived. Vivian, in particular, had become a constant thorn in Arya's side. The lady had not left court as many expected after being passed over. Instead, she had embedded herself more deeply, always present at gatherings, always perfectly positioned to make subtle comments that questioned Arya's fitness to be queen without ever saying anything actionable. I do hope you are finding the transition from the servants' quarters to the royal chambers not too overwhelming, Vivian had said just yesterday, her voice dripping false concern while a group of other nobles looked on. It must be so difficult to suddenly have responsibilities beyond scrubbing floors. Arya had smiled tightly and said nothing, as Demon had advised. Engaging with Vivian only gave her more ammunition, but each small cruelty chipped away at Arya's already fragile confidence. She spent her mornings with Elder Thorn, learning meditation techniques designed to help her reach the part of her consciousness where her wolf waited. It was harder than it sounded. Every time she tried to quiet her mind, doubts and fears rushed in to fill the silence. You do not belong here. You are not good enough. Everyone knows you are a fraud. But Thorn was patient, guiding her back each time her concentration broke. Your wolf is there, he would say. Reach for her. She wants to reach back. Arya spent her afternoons in physical training with the Royal Guard. Demon had assigned his best warrior, a gruff woman named Captain Reese, to work with her. Reese did not coddle or make allowances for Arya's lack of experience. She pushed her hard, forcing her to build strength and stamina Arya had never needed as a servant. A queen must be able to defend herself and her pack, Reese had explained. The first day, handing Arya a wooden practice sword that felt impossibly heavy. His Majesty wants you prepared for anything. The training left Arya covered in bruises and exhausted to the bone, but she could not deny the results. Her body grew stronger, her reflexes sharpened, and somewhere along the way, she started to believe she might actually survive her first shift when the time came. Her evenings belonged to Demon. He would find her after dinner, when the day's obligations were finally complete, and they would retreat to either his study or her chambers to simply be together. Sometimes they talked, sharing stories and learning about each other. Arya discovered that beneath his severe exterior, Demon had a dry sense of humor and a surprising love of ancient poetry. He learned that Arya had taught herself to read by stealing books from the palace library late at night, and that she had a gift for drawing, though she had never been able to afford proper materials. Other times, they sat in comfortable silence, Arya reading while Demon worked through endless stacks of correspondence, the mate bond between them humming contentedly at the simple proximity. And sometimes, Demon would kiss her. Soft, careful kisses that made her heart race and her entire body feel like it was on fire. He never pushed for more, always pulling back before things could progress beyond kissing, though she could see the desire burning in his golden eyes. I will not claim you fully until your wolf is free, he had explained one night, his voice rough with restrained passion. You deserve to experience our mating as your whole self, not as half of who you are meant to be. The consideration, the respect he showed for her even when she knew he wanted more, only made Arya fall harder for him. This was nothing like the distant, severe king she had observed from afar for 5 years. This was a man who listened when she spoke, who valued her opinion, who looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. But the mate bond was not the only thing growing stronger. That warmth in Arya's chest had become a constant presence, and with it came flashes of sensation and emotion that were not quite her own. Anger, frustration, anticipation. Her wolf, she realized, was becoming more aware as the bindings weakened slightly from Thorn's careful probing. 3 days before the scheduled binding-breaking ceremony, Arya had her first real breakthrough in meditation. She had been sitting in the garden with Thorn, eyes closed, trying to push past the wall of fog that always blocked her attempts to reach deeper into her consciousness. Then, without warning, she was through. She stood in that same moonlit clearing from her dreams, and the silver wolf was waiting. Up close, she was even more magnificent than Arya remembered. Easily the size of a small horse, with fur that seemed to glow with its own light, and eyes that held ancient wisdom. "Hello, little one," the wolf said, her voice resonating in Arya's mind. "I was wondering when you would finally find me properly." Arya found her voice, though speaking in this mental landscape felt strange. "You are real. I thought perhaps I had imagined you. I am as real as you are. More real in some ways since I remember what you have forgotten." The wolf padded closer, close enough that Arya could feel the heat radiating from her massive form. "I am Selene. I am your wolf, your other half, the part of you they tried to destroy but could not." "Why?" Arya whispered. "Why did someone do this to us?" Selene's silver eyes filled with sorrow. "Because we were too powerful. Because they feared what we would become if we were allowed to grow into our strength. Because your parents died protecting a secret, and you are that secret." "What secret? Please, I need to understand." But Selene shook her great head. "The memories are still locked, bound in layers even I cannot fully access. But they will return when these bindings break. You will remember everything. And then, little one, we will have our vengeance on those who tried to erase us." The meditation ended abruptly, Arya gasping as she returned to her body with a jolt. Thorn steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. "You reached her," he said, and it was not a question. "Tell me everything." Arya recounted the conversation, or what she could remember of it. Thorn listened intently, his expression growing more troubled with each word. "Selene," he murmured when she finished. "That name has power. It is old magic, moon magic. The Silver Moon Pack was named for their connection to lunar forces, and they often named their wolves after celestial bodies." He met Arya's eyes. "Your wolf is even more powerful than I suspected. We must be very careful when we break the bindings. A wolf of that strength emerging all at once could be dangerous not just to you, but to everyone around you. How dangerous? Arya asked, though she was not sure she wanted to know the answer. Dangerous enough that I am going to recommend we perform the ritual in the royal vault, the most heavily warded location in the palace. And I am going to insist that only the king, Captain Rhys, and I are present. No one else. The night before the ritual, Arya could not sleep. She paced her chambers, too anxious to sit still, her mind spinning with possibilities both wonderful and terrible. Tomorrow, she would either finally become whole, or she would lose control and hurt someone she cared about. Maybe both. A knock at her door startled her. "Come in," she called, expecting Bronwyn or Greta. But it was Demon who entered, closing the door softly behind him. He wore simple sleeping clothes, his dark hair tousled as if he had been running his hands through it. "I saw the light under your door," he said. "I thought you might want company." Arya felt tears prick her eyes at the simple kindness. "I am terrified," she admitted. "What if something goes wrong? What if I hurt you?" "You will not hurt me," Demon said with absolute certainty. He crossed to her and pulled her into his arms, and Arya went gratefully, burying her face in his chest and breathing in his scent. Pine and smoke, and home. "I trust you, Arya. I trust your wolf, and I will be there every moment, ready to help you through whatever happens." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, the mate bond pulsing between them like a second heartbeat. Finally, Demon pulled back just enough to look down at her. "Whatever you discover tomorrow, whatever memories return, know that it does not change this. It does not change us. You are mine, and I am yours. And that is all that matters." Then he kissed her, deep and passionate, pouring everything he felt into the contact. Arya kissed him back with equal fervor, trying to memorize every sensation in case this was the last moment of peace they would have. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Demon rested his forehead against hers. "Get some rest," he murmured. "Tomorrow, you meet your destiny." After he left, Arya did manage to sleep for a few hours, though her dreams were full of silver wolves and forgotten memories that danced just beyond her grasp. Morning came too quickly, and too slowly at the same time. Bronwyn and Greta helped her dress in simple clothing suitable for the ritual. No fancy gowns or elaborate styling. Just comfortable pants and a loose shirt that would be easy to remove when the time came for her first shift. Demon collected her personally, taking her hand and not letting go as they walked through the palace to the royal vault. The vault was buried deep beneath the palace, accessible only through a series of heavily warded doors that required royal blood to open. The chamber itself was circular, the walls carved with symbols that seemed to shimmer and move in the torchlight. Captain Rhys and Elder Thorn waited inside, both wearing expressions of grim determination. "Are you ready?" Thorn asked Arya. No, she wanted to say. She would never be ready for this. But she nodded anyway, because ready or not, it was time. "What do I need to do?" "Sit in the center of the circle," Thorn instructed, pointing to a space in the middle of the floor where symbols had been chalked in white. "The king should sit behind you for support. Captain Rhys and I will maintain the wards and be prepared to intervene if necessary." Arya took her position in the circle, and Demon settled behind her, his legs bracketing hers, his arms wrapping around her waist. The contact helped settle her nerves slightly. Whatever happened, he was here. Thorn began to chant in a language Arya did not recognize, his hands moving in complex patterns. The symbols on the walls began to glow, pulsing in time with his words. Arya felt it when his magic touched the bindings. It was like someone had grabbed hold of her insides and was slowly pulling them apart. She gasped, her back arching, and Demon's arms tightened around her. "I have got you," he murmured in her ear. "Just breathe. Let it happen." The pain increased as Thorn worked, his chanting growing more intense. Arya felt the first binding snap like a broken chain, and with it came a rush of sensation so intense she screamed. Colors became brighter, scents became sharper. Sounds she had never noticed before crashed over her in waves. Another binding broke, then another, each one releasing a flood of memories that had been locked away. She saw her parents' faces clearly for the first time in 20 years. Her mother, beautiful and fierce, with silver eyes just like the wolf in Arya's dreams. Her father, strong and protective, teaching her to listen to the forest. She saw the night they died, saw the attackers coming out of the darkness, saw her mother pressing something into her small hands and whispering words Arya could not quite hear. She saw the binding ritual, felt the agony as her wolf was ripped away and buried deep. She saw the face of the one who had done it, and rage unlike anything she had ever known flooded through her. The final binding shattered, and Selena exploded into Arya's consciousness with the force of a tidal wave. The shift took her instantly, no gradual transition or careful control. One moment Arya was human, the next she was wolf, massive and powerful and absolutely feral with 20 years of suppressed rage. She heard shouting, felt Demon's hands on her fur trying to calm her, but Selene was beyond reason. She lunged, teeth bared, ready to tear apart anything and anyone in her path. But then Demon shifted too, his own wolf emerging in a blur of black fur and golden eyes. He was larger than Selene, more powerful, and when he planted himself between her and the others, growling a clear warning, something in Selena recognized him. Mate. Her mate. The rage did not disappear, but it focused, channeled into something other than blind destruction. Demon's wolf approached slowly, his posture non-threatening despite his obvious readiness to fight if necessary. He pressed his massive head against Selene's neck, and she felt the mate bond snap fully into place, with a force that nearly drove her to her knees. This was what had been missing. This was what she had been searching for her entire fractured life. Selene threw back her head and howled, a sound of triumph and grief and recognition that echoed through the vault. Demon's wolf joined her, their voices blending in a song as old as time itself. Gradually, Selene's rage cooled enough for rational thought to return. Arya, still present inside the wolf's mind, managed to assert some control. Slowly, carefully, she shifted back to human form. The transition was excruciating, her body not yet accustomed to the change, but she gritted her teeth and forced it through. When she finally knelt on the floor of the vault, naked and shaking, Demon was already there in human form, wrapping her in a blanket someone had thoughtfully provided. "Easy," he murmured, rubbing her back in soothing circles. "You did it. You are through the worst." Arya looked up at Thorn, who watched her with undisguised awe. "I remember," she said, her voice raw. "I remember everything." "Tell us," Demon commanded gently. "Tell us who you really are." Arya closed her eyes, letting the memories wash over her. When she opened them again, she met Demon's gaze steadily. "My name is not Arya. It is Ariana Silvermoon, daughter of Alpha Marcus Silvermoon and Luna Celeste Silvermoon. I am the last surviving member of the Silvermoon Pack, and I know who ordered my family's death." The silence that followed was absolute. Captain Reese had gone pale. Thorn looked like he had been struck, and Demon's eyes blazed with golden fire. "Who?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. "Who did this to you?" Arya felt Selene's rage rise again inside her chest, but this time she welcomed it, let it fuel her words. "Duke Ashford," she said. "Vivian's father. He wanted the Silvermoon power and prestige for himself. When my father refused to share the Pack's ancient knowledge, when he would not reveal the source of our gifts, Ashford hired assassins to wipe out the entire Pack. My mother used the last of her power to bind my wolf and hide my memories, to make me unremarkable enough that Ashford would overlook me. Then, she placed me in the palace as a servant, where I would be hidden in plain sight until I was old enough to reclaim what was stolen from me. She stood, the blanket falling away, too furious to care about modesty. And Vivian has been wearing my pack's name like a stolen coat for 20 years, pretending to be what I actually am. They destroyed my family, stole my birthright, and made me into nothing. And now, they are going to pay for every single moment of suffering they caused. Demon stood, as well, and the expression on his face was something terrible and beautiful at once. "Then we will make them pay together," he said, "as king and queen, as mates, as justice long overdue." He pulled her into his arms, and Arya held on tight, feeling Celine's agreement thrumming through the mate bond. This was what they had been waiting for. This was why the bond had appeared now, why Demon had recognized her despite the bindings that should have made her invisible. Destiny had brought them. Together not just for love, but for vengeance and restoration. Thorn cleared his throat delicately. "Your Majesty, my lady, perhaps we should adjourn to somewhere more private to discuss strategy. The vault is secure, but there are more comfortable locations for planning what comes next." Demon nodded, finally releasing Arya enough to allow her to dress in the clothes Rhys discreetly provided. Together, they left the vault, Arya walking taller than she ever had before. She was not a servant anymore. She was not even just a queen. She was Silvermoon, and she had come home to reclaim everything that was hers. The next few days passed in a flurry of secret meetings and careful planning. Demon wanted to move immediately against Duke Ashford, but Thorn counseled patience. "We need evidence," the elder insisted. "An accusation from the king carries weight, but without proof, Ashford can claim Arianna's memories are false, that the binding broke her mind. He is powerful and well-connected. We must be certain." So they searched. Demon's most trusted guards conducted quiet investigations into the Ashford estate. Captain Rhys interviewed survivors from the night of the Silvermoon massacre, piecing together testimonies that had been ignored or suppressed 20 years ago. And Arya, working with Thorn, delved into her recovered memories looking for any detail that might prove useful. She remembered her mother giving her something the night she died. A necklace, Arya thought, with a pendant carved with the Silvermoon crest. "My mother said it was the key," Arya told Demon and Thorn. "She said when I was ready, the key would show me the truth. But I do not remember what happened to it after she put it on me." "Ashford likely took it when he placed you in the palace," Demon said grimly. "If it still exists, it will be hidden somewhere he thinks is safe." "The Ashford estate vault," Captain Rhys suggested. "Every noble family has one. If he kept trophies from the massacre, that is where they would be." "Can we access it legally?" Arya asked. Demon's smile was sharp and dangerous. "As king, I can demand access to any vault in my kingdom if I suspect treason. And I very much suspect Duke Ashford of treason." The raid on the Ashford estate happened 3 days later, in the early morning when the household was still sleeping. Demon led it personally, with Arya at his side and a full contingent of royal guards. Duke Ashford met them in the entrance hall, his face red with outrage. "Your Majesty, what is the meaning of this intrusion? You have no right to—" "I have every right," Demon cut him off coldly. "I am your king, and I suspect you of crimes against the crown. You will provide access to your family vault immediately, or you will be placed under arrest for obstruction." Ashford's eyes found Arya, standing beside Demon in a gown of silver that marked her clearly as Silvermoon rather than servant. Something flickered in his expression. Fear, perhaps, or recognition. "That girl has filled your head with lies," he blustered. "She is nobody, a servant with delusions." "She is Arianna Silvermoon," Demon said softly, dangerously. "Last daughter of Marcus and Celeste Silvermoon, the heir you tried to erase. And you will address her with the respect due to her station. or I will have your tongue removed before we proceed to your vault." The threat hung in the air. Ashford's face went from red to pale in an instant. "The vault," Demon repeated. "Now." Ashford led them down, his movements jerky with barely suppressed panic. Vivian appeared in the hallway, her hair disheveled, clearly roused from sleep by the commotion. Her eyes widened when she saw Arya. "You," she hissed. "What have you done? What lies have you told?" "No lies," Arya said calmly, though Selene growled inside her chest. Only truth finally coming to light. The vault was everything Arya expected. Dusty and old, filled with family heirlooms and carefully catalogued wealth. But Demon's guards were thorough, searching every corner, examining every item. It was Captain Reese who found it. A locked chest hidden behind a false wall, so small it would have been easy to overlook. "Your Majesty," she called. "You need to see this." Demon forced the lock with brute strength, and the chest fell open to reveal its contents. Jewelry, weapons, documents, all marked with the Silver Moon crest. Trophies, just as they had suspected, taken from the massacre. And there, nestled among the stolen items, was a silver necklace with a crescent moon pendant. Arya's hand shook as she reached for it. The moment her fingers touched the metal, the pendant began to glow with pale light. The light expanded, projecting images into the air above the chest. A recording, Arya realized, her mother's final message, preserved in the pendant with the last of her magic. Celeste Silvermoon's image appeared, beautiful and terrible, her silver eyes blazing with power and grief. "If you are seeing this, my daughter, then you have survived. You have broken the bindings and reclaimed yourself. I am sorry I could not be there to see it. I am sorry for so much." The image of Celeste looked directly at where Arya stood, as if she could see across 20 years and death itself. "Duke Ashford will tell you our pack died in a territorial dispute. He will claim we were wiped out by rogues or rival packs. All lies. We died because we refused to give him the source of our power. We died because we would not teach him the ancient magic passed down through our bloodline. Your father and I knew the attack was coming. We tried to prepare, but Ashford had too many allies, too many wolves willing to betray their own kind for gold and promises of power. On the night of the massacre, we fought. Goddess, how we fought. But we were outnumbered and betrayed from within. In our final moments, your father and I made a choice. We bound your wolf to hide you, erased your memories so Ashford would think you were just another orphan, and placed you where you would be overlooked until you were strong enough to reclaim what is yours." Celeste's image wavered, growing fainter. "The pendant you wear holds more than this message. It holds the genetic key to accessing the Silver Moon ancestral vault, hidden deep in the heart of the old forest where our pack was born. There you will find our true legacy. Power beyond what Ashford could dream. Knowledge that predates the current kingdoms. Everything you need to not just avenge us, but to rebuild what was destroyed." The image of Celeste smiled, sad and proud at once. "Be strong, my daughter. Be fierce. Be the Silver Moon we raised you to be. And know that wherever you go, whatever you do, your father and I love you. We have always loved you. We will always love you." The light faded, and the pendant went dark. Arya stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, the weight of her mother's love, sacrifice crushing and uplifting at once. Demon's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "That is all the evidence we need," he said quietly. Then, louder, to the guards, "Arrest Duke Ashford and Lady Vivian Ashford on charges of mass murder, treason, theft of magical artifacts, and crimes against the Silver Moon bloodline." Ashford tried to run. He made it perhaps 3 steps before Captain Reese tackled him to the ground and secured him in spelled chains that glowed with power. Vivian screamed, her composure finally shattering completely. "No, we did what we had to do. The silver moons were too powerful. They threatened the natural order. We were protecting the kingdom. By slaughtering children? Arya asked softly, and the room went silent. My cousins were children, Vivian. The youngest was 3 years old. What threat did she pose to your natural order? Vivian had no answer. Or if she did, the guards hauling her away cut off whatever she might have said. Demon turned to Arya, his expression gentle despite the violence of the arrest. Are you all right? Arya looked down at the pendant in her hand, feeling the weight of it. The weight of her past, her future, her destiny. I am, she said, and realized it was true. For the first time in my life, I actually am. The trial of Duke Ashford and Lady Vivian was swift by noble standards, though it still took 2 weeks to hear all the evidence and testimonies. The pendant's recorded message was played for the entire court. Survivors from the massacre, who had been too afraid to speak before, came forward with their accounts. Documents proving Ashford had hired the assassins were uncovered in his own correspondence files. The guilty verdict was never in doubt. What remained was only the sentencing. By ancient law, crimes against an entire bloodline carried the highest penalty: death. But Arya found herself standing before the throne where Demon sat in judgment, asking for something different. I do not want their deaths, she said clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the packed throne room. Death is too quick, too easy. I want them to live. I want Duke Ashford stripped of his title, his lands, his wealth, everything he stole from my family and everything he built on their graves. I want him to live as I lived, as a nobody, as nothing. And Vivian? Demon asked. Arya looked at the woman who had tormented her for 5 years, who had worn her family's name like a costume, and felt Celine's savage satisfaction when Vivian flinched away from her gaze. The same. Let her learn what it is to be invisible. Let her discover how the other half lives, the half she spent so many years looking down on. Demon's smile was proud and fierce. So it shall be. Duke Ashford, you are hereby stripped of all titles, lands, and wealth. You will be cast out from noble society, forbidden from using any name but your given one, and you will spend the remainder of your days knowing exactly what you took from those you murdered. He turned his golden gaze to Vivian. Lady Vivian Ashford, the same sentence applies to you. You are no longer noble. You are no longer Silver Moon, a name you never had the right to claim. You are simply Vivian, and you will live with the consequences of your family's crimes. The guards led them away. Ashford went silently, seeming to have aged a decade in the past 2 weeks. Vivian screamed and fought, her composure shattered beyond repair. But it changed nothing. Justice had been served. Not the bloody vengeance Selene had wanted, perhaps, but something that felt more right to Arya. They would not become martyrs. They would simply be forgotten, as they had tried to make her forgotten. In the weeks that followed, Arya began the work of rebuilding the Silver Moon legacy. True to her mother's word, the pendant led them to the ancestral vault hidden in the old forest. What they found there was beyond anything Arya had imagined. Ancient. Texts on magic that had been lost for centuries. Artifacts of power that predated the current kingdoms. And knowledge. So much knowledge about healing and protection and the old ways of living in harmony with the wild. Arya studied everything, drinking in her heritage like water after a drought. She discovered she had gifts beyond just her powerful wolf. Moon magic flowed through her veins, allowing her to heal wounds and enhance the natural abilities of those around her. With Thorn's guidance, she learned to control and channel that power. But she did not hoard the knowledge as Ashford had wanted to do. Instead, she began to share it. She opened schools to teach healing magic to any wolf who showed the aptitude, regardless of their bloodline or station. She established scholarships for Omegas who had been overlooked by traditional training programs. She used her position as queen to elevate those who had been invisible, just as she had been. and through it all, Demon was at her side. Her mate, her king, her partner in every sense of the word. 6 months after the binding was broken, they held a formal mating ceremony in the same ballroom where Demon had first chosen her. But this time, Arya wore silver and walked toward him with her head held high, every inch the queen and silver moon heir she was meant to be. When Demon marked her before the assembled court, claiming her as his mate in the traditional way, Arya felt Celene's savage joy blend with her own love and happiness. This was everything her parents had died to give her the chance to have. This was the future they had sacrificed themselves to make possible. The ceremony ended with Arya and Demon's wolves running together under the full moon, their pack bonds settling into place around them with a rightness that took Arya's breath away. She had started this journey as nothing, as invisible, as forgotten, but she had become everything she was meant to be, and she had found love and purpose along the way. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? 3 years later, Arya stood in the royal nursery, watching her daughter sleep. The baby had been born 6 months ago, perfect and healthy, with her father's dark hair and her mother's silver eyes. They had named her Celeste, after the grandmother she would never meet, but whose sacrifice had made her existence possible. Demon entered quietly, rapping, his arms around Arya from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. "She is beautiful," he murmured, "just like her mother." "She is powerful," Arya corrected softly. "I can already feel her wolf stirring. She will be strong, like her silver moon ancestors." "She will be loved," Demon said firmly. "She will grow up knowing exactly who she is and where she comes from. She will never have to wonder if she belongs, because she will know without question that she is ours and we are hers." Arya Hamaisi leaned back into his embrace, feeling the mate bond pulse between them, warm and steady and true. Around them, the palace hummed with life. Former servants elevated to positions of power based on merit rather than birth. Omegas training to become healers and warriors. A kingdom slowly transforming into something better, something more just. It had been a long journey from that night in the grand ballroom when a king had pointed at a servant in rags and declared her his queen. But Arya would not change a single moment of it. Every hardship, every challenge, every painful step had led her here, to wholeness, to love, to home. She had stood in rags at a ceremony, and the Alpha King had pointed at her and changed her life forever. And she had risen from the ashes of her destroyed pack to become not just a queen, but a symbol of hope for every wolf who had ever felt powerless or invisible or forgotten. Because if she could reclaim her destiny against all odds, then anyone could. And that, Arya thought as she watched her daughter sleep and felt her mate's arms around her, was a legacy worth fighting for. The Silver Moon Pack would rise again, not through vengeance or violence, but through love and justice, and the refusal to let the past define the future. And it would all start with one girl who had refused to stay invisible, even when the entire world tried to make her disappear. The end. But really, just the beginning.